drawn closer to you. This we ask in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, I hope you've been enjoying the Joshua series so far, as we've been kind of working our way through it one step at a time, as it's been this great adventure of Indiana Jones proportions as we're trying to figure out Joshua. Today, we get to deal with the extremely controversial issue of the lie of Rahab. You might never have thought of it as being a controversial issue, but it is. It is huge. Okay, we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So, to start off, I want you to think this into yourself here and to kind of ask yourself this type of a question. How can you tell when someone is lying? Okay, how can you tell when someone is lying? And there's usually, sometimes we get these little telltale signs that we might work with. Some people, like when I'm watching my kids, and I'm trying to find out if they're lying or not, because you know how it is. When you have more than one kid, you hear a loud crash, bang, and you hear two kids screaming, ah! And you have one kid saying it's her fault, and the other one saying it's his fault, and so someone's lying, okay? So then you got to figure out which one it is. And sometimes you might be able to tell when they're not looking at you, or they're doing one of these things, or they're just, there's so many things. But it's interesting that this whole concept of trying to tell how someone is lying was a whole thing that was developed even by the National Psychology Form of Forensic that was developed through the FBI. And so they developed this little chart that you can tell, supposedly, by eye position, how someone is lying. And now I actually use this, and it works extremely well. It's not 100% at all, so I don't say that if they fit the lying parameters that indeed they are lying, but I think that the likelihood is higher. And so I do use this quite often, especially when I work in high victim trauma situations and whatnot. Like when I worked at the Human Trafficking Center in Indianapolis, whatever, this came in handy, and it was extremely helpful. But nonetheless, people have made a science trying to figure out how lying works. And can we tell if someone is lying or not? And I'm sure all of us here are guilty at some point of having told a fib at some point in our life since we were born. I'm sure all of us are guilty. I know I've told some whoppers in my time as a child, as an adult. It has happened, right? We've all had our moments of telling something. But here comes the issue. Have you ever thought if it were right or not to tell a white lie? Okay, are white lies okay? Is there even such a thing as a white lie? Is it okay to tell a lie for a greater good outside of it? Okay, is it okay? Like one of the classic examples I've always had to deal with is when someone's baby is born and they say, look at my baby, isn't my baby beautiful? And I look at their baby and I'm thinking, no, that baby is ugly as sin. But I don't want to tell them, boy, you got the ugliest baby I've ever seen. Okay, I don't want to be truthful like that because it'll hurt the feelings of the mom. I don't want to say your Gollum looks like a troll and Gollum had a kid. I don't want to tell them that. But at the same time, I don't want to lie and say, oh, your baby's beautiful. And I've had people tell me, go ahead and lie. It won't hurt anything. It's fine. It's just a white lie, and it's okay. The mom doesn't want you to tell the truth anyways. If they don't want the truth, then it's not really lying. It's just telling what they want to hear, and it's okay. And yet I also have this inner voice that says, don't lie. Okay, and so then what do you do in situations like that? Do you just say, oh, look, he has his dad's eyes and his mom's smile? And that is an insult to the parents. So it's like, what do you do in situations like that? Or what if you're trying to make a surprise birthday party for someone? And then they ask, what you doing? And you don't want to say, making a surprise birthday party, so act surprised. You don't want to do that, so what do? Do you lie? Is it okay to say, I'm just going shopping, and I just want to get something, I'm just running some errands for work, but it's really not for work, it's for the surprise birthday party? I mean, is it okay to lie? You see where lying gets questionable. Okay, and it can come real easy to excuse a lie or to justify a lie. And maybe some lies are okay, maybe they're not. Let's find out what's going on by looking at this lie that Rahab tells in order to save the life of a couple of Israelites so they aren't arrested and killed for being spies. Okay, and so people look at it and they fight. She told a lie, and that was bad. Lying is a sin. Well, lying might be right in some cases. The Bible never says that, and on the arguments go. And then people ask, well, if you were during World War II and you were hiding Jews in your house and Germans came and knocked on your door and asked, are you hiding Jews? Are you saying you're going to tell the truth and say, yes, they're right over here? I mean, what are you, or are you going to lie and say, nope, no Jews here? I mean, what are you going to do in a situation like that? And I've always liked to say, well, it's not during World War II, and I'm not dealing with that issue. But we do need to find out. Don't you think there should be an answer to the issue of lying? Okay, and so can you tell now that this is a big conversation? This is a big topic. In fact, my notes are extra long, but I figured you guys are the sincere group. We can get out late, and that's okay, right? Oh, see, no one's lying. They're telling the truth. No, just end, and we can do part 2 next week. We don't care. And so we're gonna be diving into the book of Joshua, chapter 2. I mean, here we are, just kind of working our way through Joshua, one little piece at a time. And so we're going to be looking at Rahab, as I mentioned, and Rahab is listed in the Bible twice, not once, but twice in the New Testament as a woman of faith. Okay, she is listed twice in the book of James and the book of Hebrews as a woman of faith, as a woman to follow, as an exemplary character, as a godly woman. Okay, so she is listed twice in the Bible, in the New Testament, as a woman of faith. And so we're going to see her faith this week revealed in action, next week revealed in her word and testimony. So we're going to split her story into 2 sections. So we're going to look at her faith revealed in action this week when she hides 2 spies, but then lies about it. And that question is going to come to that lie. Okay, we're going to have to really look into that. And so in verse 1, chapter 2, verse 1, it says, Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 men as spies from the Acacia Grove, saying, go and scout the land, especially Jericho. So they left, and they came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. And it's like, well, that's interesting. Sure, that just makes sense, right? When you go into a city, the first place you think of lodging is a house of a prostitute. No, that shouldn't be the first thought you think of. But it was the thought they thought of. That's interesting. Okay, so there's a lot of moral questions I have here. Surprisingly, the Bible gives us no information why they picked her house. Was it an accidental coming across? Was it something that they were out in the market and Rahab saw them and invited them in to hide them? We don't know how they came across her house. Was it God's providence? He wanted them to find her so that they could have a safe place to hide? Or were they saying, hey, since we're in town, we can get a quickie? I mean, we don't know what was going on, if it was an immoral issue or not. We don't know. There's a lot of questions about this passage the Bible gives us 0 answers on. Okay, so all I can do is raise the questions and leave it. I can't give any answers about the morality of them going to Rahab's house. Okay, the house of ill repute, the house of prostitution. I can't give a lot of details on that other than I wouldn't want to be there myself, personally speaking. I wouldn't want my kids going there, and I would be a little bit frustrated if some of you went there, unless you went there to witness to people. But even then, I'd be like, invite them to Starbucks. Okay? You don't need to go into a strip joint to witness to people. You can wait till they come out and invite them to Starbucks and witness to them then. Okay? There are just issues at play here. So I have a lot of questions in my mind, a lot of questions, and a lot of ways that we could go into it, but we're not going to go there today. We got too much to deal with on the lie issue. We could even ask the question, was it right for Joshua to send the spies in the first place? Because why is he sending the spies? God already told him the land is yours. God already told him, go and take it. I've given it to you. So why send spies? That was one of Moses' problems, was he sent spies, although God told him to get spies and to send them, to look it over, to know that, hey, God's given it to you. Go see the land that God's given to you. But then they got freaked out by the size of the people. They were all giants. And so then they got afraid, and they wouldn't take the land. So I would think if I were Joshua, I wouldn't want to send spies. I wouldn't want people to know. I just want to take it over and just trust God. But he sent spies. And people argue, was it right for Joshua to send spies? I don't know. The Bible doesn't say that God told him to do it. The Bible doesn't say not to do it. It doesn't say. It is totally mute on the issue. Isn't that interesting? how much the Bible isn't telling us about this situation. It is really interesting how quiet it is. And so Joshua sent spies. I'll tell you this much, if he had not sent spies, the spies would not have had to go into Rahab's house to hide, and she would not have had to lie to hide them, and it would have made the whole thing a lot simpler to talk about. I do know that. So it seems like on the surface he shouldn't have sent the spies. But maybe he did it because his predecessor, Moses, who he studied under, who he mentored under, maybe he just followed like example. Some people think God told them to send spies like he told Moses back in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, but yet I look at it and go, but it's not recorded that God told them that, so I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty in this passage. What we do know is this, that verses 2 through 7 tells us a story about Rahab and her lie. And this is what we're going to zero in on. This is what we're going to really focus in on. And so verses 2 through 7, so hopefully you're ready for these. And even here is interesting that the Bible gives us only bare facts again. It doesn't tell us the details that Moses would have told us if he were writing it. Sometimes I look at it and I go, why couldn't Moses have written this? Oh yeah, he's dead. It's hard to write that way. So it says, verse 2, so the king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites' men have come here tonight to investigate the land. Well, that's interesting. How'd they find that out? It's a big city. There's people coming and going all the time. How do they know they're Israelites? How do they know they're spies? How do they know their intention and motivation? Who tipped the hand on that one? What, did they walk in saying, we're here to spy out the land? I mean, were they that stupid? I would hope not. But it's weird. How do they know? Well, it doesn't tell us. The king of Jericho sent word to Rahab and said, bring out the men. How did he know it was at Rahab's house? The questions. Bring out the men who have entered your house, for they came to investigate the entire land. Okay, so again, so many questions. But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. It's weird. They know so much about these guys, but they don't know where they're hiding. I guess their investigators weren't that good. So she said, yes, the men did come to me, but I didn't know where they were from. At nightfall, when the city gate was about to close, the men went out. I don't know where they were going. Chase after them quickly, and you can catch up with them. So her whole thing is, quick, the gate's about to close. They went that way. Run after them. Go, 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 go. And so they did. Okay, and they hurried out. And so, but she had taken the two spies, they'd taken them up to the roof of the building and hid them amongst the stalks of flax that she had arranged on the roof. So she put them in a corner somewhere and buried them in a whole bunch of stalks of flax. The men pursued the spies, them, along the road to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as they left to pursue them, the city gate was shut. So this is funny. So she's saying, quick, they went out there, go find them. And so they run out there, and right when they get outside going, where'd they go? The gate's shut, now they're trapped outside. In case you don't know this, if you're trapped outside when the gate's shut, you stay outside till dawn. You got to find lodging outside. They don't open the gate for anybody. Okay, so now these guys are stuck outside for the night. Okay, so they're going to have words in the morning. Now, so this is the situation. So Rahab, did she tell the truth or did she lie? She lied. She lied. They went that way when they really went that way. I don't know who they are or where they came from or anything. That's not true. She knows exactly who they are. In fact, we'll see next week, she even knows the name of their God, Yahweh. Okay, she knows. She knows a lot. Okay, she knows a lot. But she lied. I don't know who they are. Some men just came here. I sent them that way. They went. Go hurry. Oh, you're trapped outside. What a bummer. Ha ha. Okay, so that's the situation. Now comes the question, was she right in lying or did she sin in lying? She's a woman of faith. We know that because she accepted the Israelites. She helped the Israelites and she declared their God to be God. So we know she's a woman of faith. But just because you're a person of faith doesn't mean that you're free of all sin, right? Because all people have sinned. All people have fallen short of God's glory. So it's possible to be a person of faith and a sinner because all people of faith are sinners. Okay, so the question is this issue. Was her lie a sin, or was it okay? Okay, was her lie a sin, or was it okay? That's the big question, and I really hope that we can leave here today with a solid answer. That's going to be my goal. Okay, I'm going to try. I know I could just tell you the answer, we could go home right now, but I think the journey's more fun. I might be alone in that. We'll see. And so, we do, however, have a moral conflict now, because we know deep down inside, lying's bad, right? It's one of the 10 Commandments, do not bear false witness. We know that lying's bad. We know there's several verses in the Bible that talk about lying. In Proverbs and in Ephesians, there's lots of verses that talk about being people of truth, being people of your word. Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Don't be deceptive. We got a whole bunch of verses. Okay, but then again, we still have that white lie and all those things. So now we have a moral conflict. Lying, we know is wrong. We tell our kids, don't lie, tell the truth, right? And yet we want to save someone's life. But it seems like these two issues are at odds with each other. That's our moral conflict. Lying is wrong, but so is people being killed. So what do we do? Do we lie to save their life? Is it okay to do a small sin to avoid a greater sin from happening? Okay, now we're at a moral conflict. That's what's happening. So there have been several attempts to try to explain away or to solve this moral conflict. So let's look at these. There are three general views of how to look at this. So we're going to go through these, and then I'm going to let you know kind of where I try to stand myself to the best of my ability. Okay, so the first one is called conflicting absolutes. I know these are kind of big words, but I believe you guys can handle them. I believe you are totally able to deal with it. And so conflicting absolutes looks like this. It's where you have two issues that are at conflict absolutely. Okay, you have two issues, two moral issues at conflict absolutely. In other words, in this fallen world, there is no way out. You have no choice but to sin. You have no choice but to pick one or the other, and you're at a true, actual impasse. You're what we use the phrase, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Okay, that's this view. And this view says that in that case, we are to pick the lesser of two evils. That's this view. I'm not saying this view is right. I'm telling you that's this view. Okay, that we are to pick the lesser of two evils according to this view of conflicting absolutes. Now, knowing that, I do have some criticisms of this view. Okay, I have a few criticisms of this view. So I'm going to present criticisms, by the way, for all three views. You're welcome. There are problems with all three views. Just some of the views have more problems than others. Okay, so that's kind of how that's going to play out. And so with the issue of conflicting absolutes, we have these verses of the Bible to go against it. These verses of the Bible, you might want to write these down. These are really good verses of the Bible. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says this, that God will not tempt beyond what you are able to bear and will also provide a way out. Okay, so 1 Corinthians says that God will provide a way out. That's that verse. Okay, Hebrews 4:15 says that there is no absolute temptation that could overtake you. Jesus was tempted and did not sin. Therefore, there is a way to be tempted and not sin. That's Hebrews 4:15. And then Romans 3, that one's kind of a fun one. That's where he says, let us never do evil so that good may result. The ends do not justify the means. And so the Romans passage is very clear. You do not do a sin to make a greater thing happen. So don't do something wrong because the right result is so great. Paul says, never, ever do that. Okay, so according to these verses, view number one is wrong. Okay, so view number one is wrong. These two issues are not perfectly at odds with each other, that where you have to sin, that is not the case. 3 verses saying you do not have to sin. That is not the reality of it. And so that's what we have going against the first view. So that's nice and dandy. If you want to support the first view, you can, but you're going to have to wrestle with at least these 3 verses. I could give you more, okay, which I will later. But for right now, that's what you'd have to wrestle with, okay? In my mind, if you have to try to deal with verses of the Bible in order for your view to be okay, you might want to change your view. Because if the Bible speaks against it, it's probably not a good view. Just speaking out loud, okay? Just being honest. So that's the first view. Congratulations. The second view looks like this. It's called graded absolutism. Okay, it's called graded. I'm telling you, I'm not making these words up. These aren't my words. These are the words of the scholars and ethic professors and people who have. I got literature waist high on this issue. Okay, I am not kidding. There is so much research on this issue. It's not funny because it's a very serious issue. Very serious issue. Okay, we really got to have an answer with this. And so with this one, with graded absolutism, what this says is that some sins have hierarchy over other sins so that when they come in conflict, the sins that are of a lower hierarchy are viewed as no longer sin as long as the greater sin is avoided. So what this view says, to put it in simpler terms, is this. If you lie to save someone's life, the lying's not a sin because lying is less of an issue than somebody dying. So therefore, God says, I know you lied, but I will ignore that as a sin. It wasn't sin. It was perfectly good to do because you had a greater thing that you were doing. And so there's a hierarchy of behavior, and as long as your goal is the higher hierarchy, then it's okay. Okay, so that's this view. Now, I do have some things against this view. And by the way, all the verses of the previous view work. Because again, that is a fancy way of ends justifying the means. So all those verses can graduate right on in to this view. But I do have additional points of additional thought against this view. And that additional thought is this. Nowhere in the Bible does God say, oh, you did something wrong, but that's actually a good thing to do. Nowhere in the Bible has God ever said that. It doesn't exist, okay? God does not say, oh, look, you did sin, but this great thing came out of it, so I ignore it. That is not the case. Sin is still sin, right? And what's wrong is wrong, the end. Okay, so no. So this view does not explain the issue whatsoever. Does not explain it at all. All right, so that one just doesn't work. The ends do not justify the means. The Roman passage still applies. And nowhere in the Bible does God just call sin good because something great came out of it. That is not the case at all. Okay, not the case at all. So then that leaves us with the third view. And this last final view I could give you a dozen more, but these are the big 3. These are the big 3. And so this third view looks like this. It's called non-conflicting absolutes. Don't you love these big words? You guys all get to leave here smarter than you came in. Isn't that great? You're welcome. And so non-conflicting absolutes. What this view says is this, that when you have two morals that are at conflict with each other, lying and somebody being killed, and you have that conflicting with each other, what this view says is they're actually not at conflict because there's option number 3 that you haven't explored yet. That there's another choice that's available. You don't have to lie to save their life. There is some other way to do it. Some third option. Some third issue. Call it, if door number A is sin and door number B is sin, pick between the two. Well, maybe there's a door number C or letter C. Okay, that's this view, that there's always a third door, and that third door is what needs to be explored rather than the other two, because the other two are sin. Okay, so that's this view. And by the way, most Southern Baptist theologians and scholars land on this view. Now, I told you I had something against all the views. So do I have something against this view? I actually do have something against this view. It's not a Bible verse. I actually don't have Bible verses against this view. This view, theologically, is the most on track, and it is the view I tend to land myself on. However, there is a problem with this view, and that is this. I find it a little bit naive. And the reason I find it naive is because we are sometimes finding ourselves in situations where you have urgency to make choices right now, and sometimes we don't have time to sit down and research a third door. Sometimes we don't have time to try to figure out another option. You have to choose now. They're at the door knocking now. It's not the time to sit down and try to figure out what's the best way to handle this, because the time has come. Kind of like if you're in a ring and it's a boxing match and you got like Mike Tyson or somebody on the other side, or Mayweather or whoever, okay, and that bell rings, ding, and they're coming at you. Now's not the time to start figuring out what's the best move and strategy to deal with this person. Okay, you're kind of at a loss at this point. You got to deal with what you got to deal with. Okay, so this view, while I believe is the most truthful view, it tends to lead people toward a judgmental point of view, saying you should have. And that makes it really hard because life doesn't allow us the time and luxury sometimes to know all the possible choices. And we have to choose with the best of the knowledge we have at that moment. A way of looking at it would be this. How many of here, if you knew then what you know now, you might have made a different choice? Anybody have ever had a situation like that in your life at all that you can look back on and say, if I just knew then what I know now, I might have chosen differently. But I didn't know then. I had no idea, so I made the best choice with the knowledge that I had. And that's the best I could do. And I chose poorly because I didn't know there was another option. I thought it was the best option. Looking back, it was wrong. But here's the thing. At least you could look back and say, I chose poorly. When we look back and say, that wasn't even wrong, now we have a different issue. Now we have a different issue. And so we kind of going to have to explore that a little bit and ask ourselves some very serious questions. Because with this, what we have to realize is a couple of major issues on where we're going to stand on this issue of lying, especially when we're dealing with so much ethical dilemmas and moral dilemmas with this. Okay, so I'd like to at least point this out. Old Testament and New Testament condemn lying, period. I just gave a couple of examples in Proverbs chapter 12, Ephesians chapter 4. There's a lot more. 10 Commandments and onward. Okay, there's a lot that are there. For simplicity's sake, here's two. That condemns lying, and condemns lying universally. Okay, never allows for a white lie to exist. Never allowing for lying to protect somebody or anything. It doesn't allow for that. There's just a straight out, no lying, no deception, nothing, the end. Okay, so the Bible's fairly strict on that issue. So we do have that we have to wrestle with. That the Old Testament and New Testament, I mean, it's one thing to say the Old Testament did it, but then some people might be like, but the Old Testament's old. The New Testament's newer. Maybe it's better. Well, they both say it's wrong. So the end. Okay, so just FYI. So we do have to realize that. Okay, we're going to have to square that one around. We also do have Romans chapter 3, which I've already shared. That is, the ends do not justify the means. Where Paul says, absolutely not, do not do anything that is deceptive or evil in order for something better to happen. Okay, so do not commit sin in order to make some better result take place. So Paul makes that absolutely clear as well. He doesn't make it about lying per se. He talks about sin on a general level. Okay, so this would also apply to, hey, young girl, don't marry a non-Christian boy thinking that by marrying him, you could sleep with him good enough that he will become a Christian later. Okay, ends do not justify the means. And just because two people got married and then the person did get saved later doesn't mean that that marriage was not sin when it started. Okay, it was still sin to marry outside the faith. And so that's this verse. It covers whole multitude of sins. Okay, do not do any sin thinking of some greater ends justify the means result. That is not the case. It's still sin. Even though God can grow a rose in a thorn bush, does not mean you go dancing in thorn bushes. Okay, so God can make a blessing happen, but you don't commit sin expecting a blessing. That's this verse, and that applies to lying as well, though it's not a direct lying verse. That's why it's not listed in that first point there. Okay? And then we have this, and this is vital. God is truth. God is called truth. Jesus even said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody can come to the Father except through me. Book of John. Okay, I am the way, the truth. God is a God of truth. His word is called truth. It is actually said that God cannot lie repeatedly in the Bible. Here's two of them. Titus chapter 1, Hebrews chapter 6. God cannot lie. It's interesting. People always talk about that God can do anything. God can do anything. Well, the Bible says there are things God cannot do. People go, what do you mean there's something God can't do? Well, God cannot sin, and God cannot lie. There are things God cannot do. God cannot cause himself to cease to exist either. Okay, there are just things he cannot do because he is God, and he would not do because he is God. Okay, and God cannot lie. So God is truth. He is the author of truth. He cannot lie because he is God. Jesus could not tell a white lie and still go to the cross. Jesus could not look at an ugly baby, think it's an ugly baby, call it beautiful, and still go to the cross holy and pure because he made a deception. Okay, he cannot. But you know who is called a liar and the father of lies? Satan. Also the book of John. Okay, Satan is called the father of lies. He's called a liar, and he's called the father of lies. John chapter 8, verse 44. Okay, so here's the thing. If God is truth, and Satan is a liar, and if everything God does is truth, and Satan's the father of lies, then what does that make lying? See the issue now. Lying's wrong. Lying's wrong. Okay, and so whenever by the way, in case you're wondering, if I ever see an ugly baby, I just go, man, you guys, you've started growing your family, and praise the Lord, you've been blessed with a child. I'd say great things. I don't lie. I do my best not to lie. I want to be a person of truth, and I do my best not to lie, and I do my best to tell the truth, and I understand that some truths are not appropriate to speak because I also want to be a person of grace and treat people with tact. And so I try my best to have words be truthful without saying everything. Because not everything needs to be said, right? And I'm not trying to withhold anything for deceptive purposes. And so there are times if I'm trying to make a surprise birthday party, I go, what are you doing? I'm out on an errand. Oh, what you getting? Things. I worked that out, okay? Because I don't want to spoil the fun. Okay? I don't want to spoil the fun. And so I work with it by not lying, but not saying everything because I know they want to be surprised. Okay? And so it's just one of those things. When we look at this, we have to realize truth matters to God. Okay? The truth matters to him. If God is truth, and his word is truth, and God cannot lie, and Satan's the father of lies, that means that the truth matters to God. It matters that your word can be trusted. It matters that if you live a life of deception and lying, and people know it, and then you tell them about Jesus, what have you just done? You've told them potentially that Jesus should not be trusted because how can they trust you? My mom had this. She took this to I got to learn this from my mom at a very early age. My mom would never tell me Santa Claus was real. Okay, she always told me that he wasn't real, that there was a guy that was named Nicholas that was considered a saint in the Catholic Church, and that he did help some orphanages by delivering some toys to them and whatnot, and that he did some great things, but that the Santa Claus does not exist in flying reindeers in the North Pole shop and with elves and workshop and coming down my chimney and blah, blah, blah. She's like, that's not real. And the reason she told me that up front was because her fear was that if she told me, here is this being who is all-knowing, you're good or bad, and all-powerful to be able to travel the world in one night, and able to know all things and have all the abilities, and then to find out that he's fake, and then being told that there's a God who is all-knowing if you're good or bad, and is all-knowing and is all-powerful, but he's real. Her fear was that the lie of Santa Claus would infiltrate and affect my trust in her testimony about Jesus. And so she told me, no Santa Claus. You might be like, then why do you dress up as Santa Claus for Halloween? Because I'm not telling anyone I'm the real Santa. They know I'm not the real Santa because I take off my beard to scratch my face. I put it back up. I'm not at all about that. And so when kids tell me, are you the real Santa? I always try to play it calm. I want to respect other people's points of view a little bit. So I just say, go ask your parents. Okay, and we'll go from there. I try to be respectful, but I want to be a person of truth. I don't want to say yes, because I'm not. And I'll even tell some kids, I'll just go, hi, click, but then it freaks them out and they cry. And so I find go ask your parents is a much safer thing to do. But we have this issue, though. We have to recognize the truth matters. And if we're going to be people who are going to be willing to lie, then our testimony becomes suspect. And the discussion of the Bible becomes suspect, because where does the lying stop and the truth begin? Okay, so we have some very, very serious questions here. And that brings us right to this interesting quote that I ran across from John Calvin. And he said this, and I love this. John Calvin has some interesting writings. He has some bad writings, but he has some good writings as well. He said this. He said, those who hold what is called a dutiful lie to be altogether excusable do not sufficiently consider how precious truth is in the sight of God. Therefore, although our purpose be to assist our brethren, to consult for their safety and relieve them, it never can be lawful to lie, because that cannot be right, which is contrary to the nature of God. And God is truth. Of all the things he said, that is my wonderful favorite things, because he nails it right on the head. Now let me offer this, and may this be a word of encouragement to each of us here. Check this out. I had mentioned that twice Rahab was mentioned in the New Testament as what type of person? Person of faith. In fact, she's listed in the Hall of Faith in the book of Hebrews. The Hall of Faith. It's not called the Hall of Faith. I call it the Hall of Faith because we have like the Hall of Fame, right? You got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Country Hall of Fame and the Wrestling Hall of Fame. You got all these Hall of Fames. Well, the Bible has that in the book of Hebrews, and it's chapter 12, and it's the Hall of Faith instead of the Hall of Fame. And it goes through all these people that are great people of faith. And Abraham's there, Moses is there, Rahab's there. Rahab, the prostitute who lied, is on this list. Because when God looks at us, he does choose to reward us based upon our response to him, not just upon our sin. He recognizes that we are sinners. He recognizes that Jesus died to cover all sins for all time, for his people. That Jesus died for that. And all people have that available to them. The people of God are covered, which means that Jesus' sacrifice covered the people in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament as well as beyond. It was an eternal sacrifice for an eternal sin. And when God looks upon Rahab, he sees a woman who obeyed God. And he forgives her lie and welcomes her to the Hall of Faith. And how encouraging is it to know that when God looks at each of us, he sees us for how we respond to him, and he forgives the sins that are there. He looks at us and he says, you are a child of mine, and you have faith because you believed me, and you believed in Jesus. You are a child of faith. Your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. You're on the Hall of Faith. And the sins that you've done is forgiven. Not that it's okay. It's forgiven. What a great God we have that will take Rahab, who lived a life of sin and was a liar, and would redeem her, would restore her, would forgive her and accept her in the hall of faith. What a great God we have. So don't get all caught up in all the lies you've done and say, woe is me. Recognize what you've done, that the blood of Jesus covers it, and be people of truth from this day forward. Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, you are such an awesome God. Your grace is just mind-boggling. While we were sinners, you offered forgiveness. While we were enemies to you, you offered your Son for us. You're so undeserving, and yet you did it anyway. Your grace and your mercy are amazing. And Lord, help us respond to your grace. Help us to respond to your mercy by being people of truth. Help us, Lord, to have the boldness to speak accurately and lovingly and appropriately in your name, in a way that doesn't dishonor you, in a way that doesn't discredit you, in a way that does not misrepresent you. Help us be people of truth. Fill us with wisdom to make the right words spoken at the right time and in the right way. Lord, fill us with your Spirit. Empower us. Fill us with wisdom. That when we leave here, we will be better examples of you in the words that we speak. This we ask in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. You guys are dismissed.